Hello, welcome back to Virtual Worm tutorial number 4. In our last tutorial, we went over the basics of orbiting and panning and zooming so that we could eventually just get the perspective that we want on the virtual worm. So one common problem that I myself and others can run into when working in 3Ds, you can find yourself kind of off and things are kind of not where you expect them to be, or you feel disoriented. So we want to know how to get back to our original view and kind of reset things a little bit. So one thing I'd like you to do now is hit Shift and the C key, and what this does is kind of acts as a reset on allowing us to see everything in the scene and center our view around the origin. It also pops this cursor, this little crosshair with red and white circle, right at the origin. So now if we hit the C key, we're actually going to center our orbiting focus, or center our origin of rotation for orbiting, at the origin of the 3D scene. So that now if we start orbiting, we'll notice that the center of the scene and the center of the worm essentially are at the direct center of our orbiting rotation. Now if we want to take advantage of the numpad or the num keys at the top of your keyboard, if you selected the Emulate Numpad button, we can take advantage of these to allow us to adjust our view in pretty standardized ways. If we hit the 3 key on the numpad, or 3 at the top of your keyboard, if you have Emulate Numpad selected, then it'll bring us into a side view in which we're looking at the left side of the worm. And then if we want to kind of zoom in but have a little bit more control, we can do this border select zoom where we press Shift and B and these little crosshairs come up, and what we want to do is just basically draw a box around the view panel that we want to see, and Blender will automatically zoom us in to the optimized zoom setting for that box that we've selected. So I told you that the 3 key brings us into the right perspective. If we hit Shift 3, it'll actually bring us around to the left perspective. And now if we actually hit 1 on the numpad or on the keyboard, if you have Emulate Numpad selected, you should come to the front view. Shift 1 will bring you to the back view. 7 will bring you to the top view, and then Shift 7 will bring you to the bottom or ventral view of the worm. So I'm going to go back and press 3 and bring us back to our side view. So now we're kind of looking at what we saw originally when we first opened the file. So in addition to 1, 3, and 7, which give us the front, side, and top views respectively, we can also use 2 and 8 to actually rotate our view up and down. We're kind of rotating along the x-axis of our viewing plane. What we see here. And then 4 and 6 will allow us to kind of rotate our view left and right around the z-axis. So no matter what view you're in, if you hit 4 and 6, you'll kind of rotate your perspective. It's kind of like orbiting, but in a very controlled manner. And this is actually done in 15-degree increments, which can be, that value, the 15 degrees, can be set in the user preferences. And one thing I'll just say right now is you'll notice that there's a relatively smooth transition, or there should be, between the different perspectives. And that's a result of this smooth view setting that we originally set in the first tutorial. Okay, so that's some of the perspective adjustments using the numpad or the keyboard numbers if you have Emulate Numpad selected. If by any chance you don't have Emulate Numpad selected and you hit some of the keyboard numbers, you might see some wacky things where things seem to disappear and so forth. Don't panic. I'll explain that a little bit later, but probably the best thing you can do right away is just close the file and reopen it, and so you get back into your file. But I can explain what that does a little bit later. Okay. That's it for this tutorial. Next tutorial we'll talk about selecting cells and objects and how to visualize them.